Breaking right now, the British royal family is reportedly facing one of its most dramatic internal power struggles yet. In a move that has stunned royal watchers, Princess Anne allegedly stopped Queen Camilla from taking part in key discussions surrounding Prince William's future coronation. And what makes this story so explosive is not simply that Camilla was left out, it is who allegedly made it happen. Princess Anne has spent decades building a reputation as one of the monarchy's most disciplined, loyal, and duty-driven figures. She rarely creates controversy, rarely explains herself, and almost never gets involved in public drama. But according to reports surrounding the palace, Anne may have quietly drawn a line. Camilla's name allegedly disappeared from important planning discussions. Invitations reportedly stopped arriving. Confidential briefings were allegedly restricted to a much smaller circle surrounding William and Anne. If true, this was not an ordinary scheduling decision. It was a message. And that message may have been that the future of the monarchy would be shaped by William and those closest to him, not by Camilla. So why would Anne take such a drastic position? Was this really about protecting William and the institution, or does it reveal a much deeper tension between Anne and Camilla that has been building for years? To understand what may have happened, we have to go back to the beginning. For generations, the British monarchy has survived because its members understand one fundamental rule: personal feelings must remain secondary to duty. But behind the ceremony, protocol, and carefully rehearsed public appearances, royal families are still families. They disagree, they compete, and sometimes, according to palace insiders, those disagreements become impossible to hide. The alleged conflict surrounding William's future coronation appears to centre on exactly that problem. William is preparing for a reign that will eventually define a new era for the monarchy. His relationship with Catherine, Princess of Wales, represents a different image of royal leadership, younger, more modern, and heavily connected to public expectations. Camilla, meanwhile, has spent years rebuilding her place within the institution. Her journey from one of the most controversial figures connected to the royal family to Queen Consort was extraordinarily difficult. Her public image changed dramatically over time, and she gradually established herself as a senior member of the monarchy. But according to the claims surrounding this story, Anne never completely accepted the idea that Camilla should have a major influence over the future direction of the institution. Anne's approach has always been different. She has spent her life serving the monarchy without demanding attention. She has built her reputation through duty rather than popularity. That difference may explain why tensions reportedly developed. While other members of the family appeared increasingly comfortable with Camilla's role, Anne allegedly remained distant and carefully measured. There was politeness, there was protocol, but, according to royal sources cited in the story, there was little warmth. And when Charles became king, the question of influence reportedly became even more important. Camilla's visibility increased, her responsibilities expanded, her public confidence grew. To some, that represented a successful transformation. To others, it raised a different question. How much influence should the Queen Consort have over the future reign of William? That question allegedly became impossible to ignore. According to the reports described in this story, Anne eventually became concerned that Camilla's growing influence was moving beyond symbolic support. The issue allegedly was not Camilla's existence within the monarchy, it was where the boundaries should be. Anne is portrayed as believing that William needed enough freedom to establish his own identity before becoming king. And a coronation is more than a ceremony, it is a statement about the future. Every decision, the symbolism, the people involved, the traditions emphasized, and even the tone of the event can shape how a new reign is perceived. That meant William needed control over the vision. And according to the claims, Anne believed Camilla's increasing involvement could interfere with that process. The result was reportedly a quiet change in the way planning was handled. Instead of confronting Camilla publicly, the palace allegedly narrowed the circle. Meetings became more restricted, briefings were shared selectively, and Camilla's name reportedly appeared less frequently in discussions surrounding William's future coronation. The most humiliating part, according to the story, was that Camilla allegedly did not receive a direct explanation. She reportedly discovered her exclusion indirectly after members of her own staff questioned why she had not received information about an important planning meeting. At first, it could have been dismissed as an administrative mistake, but then more omissions allegedly appeared. One missing invitation can be accidental, several become difficult to explain, and if these reports are accurate, Camilla eventually realized that she had not simply been forgotten, she had been left outside the circle. That changed everything. But Anne may not have been acting alone. The story claims that Prince William had already become increasingly uncomfortable with Camilla's involvement in decisions connected to his future reign. For years, William had maintained a careful public relationship with his stepmother. There were no major public confrontations, no dramatic accusations, no open feud. But privately, the relationship may have been far more complicated. According to the allegations in this account, the breaking point came during a private meeting at Clarence's house. William reportedly wanted to discuss boundaries. His position was supposedly straightforward. His future reign had to be his own. He wanted the freedom to establish his priorities, define the symbolism of his coronation, and shape the monarchy without feeling overshadowed by the previous generation. The conversation allegedly began calmly. William reportedly explained that some ceremonial and symbolic decisions needed to remain within his own planning circle. Camilla, however, allegedly interpreted the request differently. According to the story, she was not willing to simply step aside. A remark attributed to her during the confrontation suggested that the traditions being discussed were merely symbolic, but William allegedly saw the issue differently. To him, symbolism was the entire point. A coronation is symbolic, a crown is symbolic, a ceremony is symbolic, but those symbols tell the public who the monarchy believes it is becoming. And according to this account, William eventually delivered a blunt message. This is not your crown to shape. Whether those exact words were ever spoken cannot be independently established from the claims presented here. But within the story, that sentence represents the moment the relationship changed. William allegedly left the meeting convinced that the boundaries had to become clearer, and the next person he reportedly turned to was Princess Anne. The timing of William's conversation with Anne is presented as significant. According to the story, William explained what had happened. Anne allegedly agreed that the issue was no longer personal, it was institutional. Together, they supposedly decided that Camilla would no longer be involved in certain areas of William's coronation planning. And instead of announcing the decision, they allegedly allowed the palace machinery to make the change quietly. Agendas changed. Guest lists were adjusted. Correspondence was redirected. Meetings continued without Camilla. This is where the alleged power struggle becomes especially fascinating. There was no public announcement saying Camilla had been removed. There was no dramatic confrontation outside the palace. There was simply an increasingly obvious absence. And in royal circles, absence can communicate almost as much as presence. For Camilla, the alleged realization was reportedly devastating. Her staff noticed, her advisors noticed, and eventually, Camilla herself allegedly understood what was happening. According to the story, her anger was intense. She reportedly felt that after spending years rebuilding her reputation and earning her place beside Charles, she was once again being treated as an outsider. And that feeling may have been amplified by the fact that William was now at the center of the future. The monarchy was moving forward, and Camilla was allegedly being moved backward. Then came the most difficult part. King Charles was reportedly caught between his wife and his son. Camilla wanted his support, William wanted control over his future, and Anne was allegedly standing firmly behind William. For Charles, this created an almost impossible dilemma. He is not simply a husband, he is the king. Every personal decision has institutional consequences. According to the story, Camilla confronted Charles privately and demanded to know why she was being treated like a guest within an institution where she had spent years fighting for acceptance. The exact details of that alleged confrontation remain unverified. But the emotional conflict is easy to understand. Camilla had endured years of criticism. She had gradually become accepted by large sections of the public. She had finally reached the position of queen consort. And now, according to these reports, the future king's inner circle was allegedly moving forward without her. Charles reportedly tried to defend her position, but Anne was not persuaded. In the story, Charles reminded Anne that Camilla was his wife and had endured enormous public pressure. Anne's alleged response was much colder. Her priority was not protecting feelings, it was protecting the institution. The message attributed to her was simple: William was the future, and the future could not be compromised. Then another figure began to matter more than anyone expected: Catherine. While Camilla was allegedly fighting to preserve her influence, Catherine did not appear to fight for influence at all. She simply became increasingly important. That difference may be crucial. Catherine's role beside William has developed gradually over many years. She understands his public image, his priorities, and the expectations surrounding the next generation. According to the story, she became closely involved in discussions about what William's coronation could represent. The goal was not simply to recreate the past, It was to honor tradition while making the ceremony meaningful for a modern audience. Catherine allegedly supported ideas that would give younger generations a visible role and connect the ceremony to the legacy of Queen Elizabeth II. Her influence was described not as forceful but steady. She did not need to demand attention. She already had William's trust. And that may have been the most important difference of all. Where Camilla allegedly needed to fight to maintain her place in the conversation, Catherine was already standing beside the future king. She represented continuity. She represented the next chapter. And William was increasingly focused on what came next. The contrast could hardly have been clearer. Camilla represented the current reign. Catherine represented what came next. And William was increasingly focused on what came next. But the situation reportedly reached another level when Charles allegedly summoned Anne for a private conversation. The purpose was supposedly straightforward. Charles wanted her to reconsider. He wanted Anne to restore Camilla's involvement and prevent a deeper family fracture. But according to the story, Anne refused. Charles reportedly appealed to loyalty. He emphasized Camilla's sacrifices and the years she had spent rebuilding her reputation. But Anne allegedly remained focused on one question: what is best for the future of the monarchy? That distinction may explain why Anne is such a powerful figure in this story. She was not portrayed as someone trying to humiliate Camilla. She was portrayed as someone who believed the monarchy had to evolve and that William needed room to define his own reign. In the alleged private meeting, Charles was reportedly forced to confront a difficult reality. His authority as king did not mean that every member of the family would automatically follow his wishes. Anne had her own influence, William had his own authority, and the future was already beginning to shift away from Charles's generation. When the conversation ended, Anne allegedly did not apologize. She did not reverse course, she simply left. And that may have been the clearest answer of all. Afterward, the palace allegedly entered damage control mode. No dramatic statement was released. No one publicly confirmed a dispute. Instead, official language remained deliberately vague. The emphasis was placed on cooperation, continuity, and support for William. But according to the story, one detail stood out. Camilla was not mentioned. That omission immediately created speculation. Was it simply diplomatic wording? Or was it an intentional signal? Royal institutions are extremely careful with language. Every phrase can be examined. Every omission can become a headline. And if Camilla really had been removed from important planning discussions, then saying nothing may have been the safest strategy. Inside the palace, staff were reportedly instructed to avoid speculation and maintain a united public image. But the problem with secrecy is simple. The more people involved, the harder it becomes to keep a secret. And eventually, according to this story, something even more explosive emerged: a letter. The story claims that Princess Anne wrote a private letter to Charles weeks before Camilla's alleged exclusion. The letter was supposedly never intended for the public. Its message, however, was described as unusually direct. Anne allegedly warned that the monarchy could lose its purpose if personal relationships became more important than duty. She reportedly expressed concern about appearances, public trust, and the danger of allowing the institution to become more focused on personalities than responsibility. Camilla was allegedly not named directly, but the implication was reportedly obvious. Anne's message was said to center on William. She allegedly viewed him as the strongest bridge between tradition and the future. And she reportedly urged Charles to recognize that protecting the monarchy sometimes meant stepping aside. That is perhaps the most uncomfortable idea at the heart of this entire story. Kings eventually become the past. Heirs become the future. And institutions survive by preparing for what comes next. If the claims surrounding this alleged letter are accurate, Anne was not simply challenging Camilla. She was warning Charles that the monarchy could not remain trapped in the conflicts of the previous generation. William's reign was coming. Catherine's role was growing. And the institution was already preparing for a different era. Whether Anne truly orchestrated Camilla's exclusion, whether William personally demanded it, or whether the entire story has been exaggerated through palace speculation, remains uncertain. But the underlying question is impossible to ignore. Who gets to shape the future of the British monarchy? Charles, Camilla, William, or the people, like Princess Anne, who believe their responsibility is to protect the institution above everyone else? One thing is certain: the royal family's most important battles are rarely fought in public. They happen behind closed doors, through private conversations, carefully worded statements, missing invitations, and decisions that may never be officially explained. And if the reports surrounding this alleged conflict are even partly accurate, Princess Anne may have just made one of the boldest moves of her royal life. She did not shout. She did not issue a public warning. She simply drew a line around the future. And on the other side of that line stood Camilla. So what do you think? Was Princess Anne protecting William and the future of the monarchy? Or did she go too far by pushing Camilla away? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to follow the latest royal developments, make sure to subscribe.